session meeting of the City Council for January 24th, 2022. I'll officially call the meeting to order and ask Carla to conduct the roll call, please.
Beaufore. Here. Birgen.
Here I am.
Drenkow.
Here.
Glazer. Oh, Glazer. Meyers. Here. Obviously an old one. Here. Goodness. Kangas.
Present. And he's calling in.
Here. Schneider.
Here. It's all right to recycle.
It's okay. We got that squared away. Welcome back, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you.
I appreciate
Sorry I wasn't able to be here last week.
That's okay. We both had better places to be, more than likely.
Well, you had a much better place.
Oh, okay. Well, I won't speak for you. So, but all right. And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Move forward with item number D, is the approval of the agenda.
I will move the approval of the agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion by Drenkow, second by Schneider. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Motion carries. Move forward with item E, is presentation of certificate of appreciation. If a few members back in the back with us, I'll ask all of them can come up. But, most importantly, the chair of the Ball Diamond Task Force, Mr. Jeremy Langner. We've got a whole slew of members that were part of that task force and its creation. Mr. Langner, of course, Josh Petersen, Tina Miller, Jennifer Nuss, Charlie Heyer, Chuck Brittan, Kevin Miller, Dean Soas, and Rathe and Matt Schneider, our council members and former mayor. I'll open it up to Mr. Langner to give us some words of wisdom.
I don't know about that. No, I just want to say thank you to current council, past council, the citizens of Waverly, and a lot of individuals who have taken a lot of time just to move this project forward. We're all aware this is a multi-decade conversation. It's not complete. You know, there's still conversations to be had, but I think what we found in the last 18, 24, 36 months were a lot of difficult conversations about a project that we've all been wanting to see happen for a long time. I feel blessed and fortunate to be a part of it. I know the task force members that are here, those that couldn't be here, council members, again, are all appreciative of what the city has done. We're not done. We still have work to do. We still have a project to complete. I think James and Garrett are probably happy that the number of text messages and phone calls from me have diminished a little bit so they can focus on other things, because I tend to be a little bit annoying when it comes to that. But again, I'm very appreciative to the city and everything they've done, and I look forward to the snow melting, us getting out there and trying to complete the project so we can get out there hopefully this fall and see kids play. So thank you very much.
Absolutely, and I just want to articulate that the passion that the task force has had over that period of time, since its inception and then to its dissolving state that it's in at this point in time, that passion doesn't have to end by any means. You know, you're all voices of the community as individuals, as citizens, but more so just for the fact that it did dissolve per our rules and regulations. As such, we still want to hear from you and have insight into the project as well. So just not as a formal
and I
body.
will go on the record and say we're not opposed to dissolving it, so we're on the same.
we know that. But a lot of people, I've done my job and I'm out, that kind of thing. And of course with fundraising, you said that the project is not done physically or financially. So do you have any comments to that you'd like to make?
Yeah, we're continuing to seek out donations. We're taking a break, you know, we get into the holiday season, and things are there. We have some big announcements, I think, that are coming up, but we'll continuing to have those conversations. It is open to the public. Anybody can participate individually or as a family to provide memorials to the project. We'll continue to seek that and again, recognize people as we move forward to the completion of that project. So one thing that I've found in this volunteerism is that our community is hit up hard for a lot of great things. They're very supportive, and during a pandemic, it's really hard to fundraise, knowing what, there's a lot of uncertainty. But again, I would say that the people of Waverly and those around that supportive also said, we know of other projects that we want to support. And so they're very thoughtful and mindful of the things that they want to do in our community and our surrounding towns. So.
And I look forward to working individually with Jeremy on a project for fundraising here in the very near future. So stay tuned with that. So, any comments from the council?
Well, I just wanted to say not only congratulate your group on the fantastic job that you did, but I want to thank you, Jeremy, in particular, for taking the time to keep the council members in the loop and informed as to what was going on. That doesn't always happen, and I at least personally, really appreciated that. Thank you.
Anything further? All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you
Thank you, folks, that joined us. All right. We will move forward with Section F, public comments for items not on the agenda. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes unless additional time is granted by the presiding officer. All remarks shall be addressed to the council as a whole and not to any individual member. Any public comments this evening? See what nobody rise to the occasion. We'll move forward to Section G, study session calendar. Item number 1, Waverly Comprehensive Plan, Park and Open Space Plan, Bike and Pedestrian Plan, Memorial Park Master Plan discussion with MSA. Mr. Bronner and MSA.
Yes, sir. Jim, the crew are here, and they're going to kind of jump in and speak kind of the first full engagement of council since this was really presented and accepted to start with. So I don't know if you want to pop up, Jim, or someone from the group kind of give a brief intro and kind of outline what we're going to do here tonight and kind of what your expectations are.
Sure, that's exactly what I got prepared.
Outstanding. We're on the same page.
My only question is, what's the best way to, so when we were here for the P&Z meeting earlier this month, we were just able to get into the Zoom session, I think, that was on and share my screen so I could go through my PowerPoint. Is that an option tonight, or should I just
Plug it in.
I can go from, okay.
Yeah, Garrett can.
Plug in right here. Get you on the screens.
I'll be nice and reach over there.
No, just
You can sit. You can sit there.
Okay.
That's fine.
Perfect. That works. Yep. Yeah. Sorry about the delay, folks.
That's okay.
Sweet.
should go on to their computers as well.
Nice. Perfect. All right.
Perfect.
All right, you're up.
I'm up. All right. We'll go ahead and get started. Introductions. Did a little bit there. I'm Chris Jansen. I'm the public engagement project manager for this whole project, and I'll explain how that kind of works and how that fits in with everything as we go through. Also with me tonight, I have Jim Holtz and Shannon Gap, who are also on the project team for the comprehensive plan. As we said, we are basically doing 4 plans, really. We're doing the Waverly Comprehensive Plan, a bike and pedestrian trail plan, a park and open space plan update, and then also as part of that, a Memorial Park Master Plan as part of that park and open space project. Tonight we'll talk a little bit about kind of the scope of the project, so you guys can, some of you have been following this, some of you are probably well steeped in it, but feel free to ask questions at any time too. I know this is kind of a work session, so happy to field those at any time you have them, but review a little bit of the engagement schedule. We'll talk about project objectives, and then I want to get a chance to get some of your expectations down so that we can ensure that the plan that we're putting together, the scope that we put together at this point, is meeting some of the things that you need out of this comprehensive plan, the park plan, the bike and ped plan. And then talk a little bit about upcoming engagement activities, and then also hopefully do a short and sweet SWOT analysis with you guys, which is something we did with P&Z, the Golf Commission earlier this month, Leisure Services next month, as well as what will be available to the public on the website and at our first community kind of input workshop that we'll do. So again, we're lumping all these plans together to basically take advantage of an engagement process that can basically span all of them. So we have that comprehensive plan, the bike plan, and the open space and parks plan, and that Memorial Park master plan. But they're all going to be under this engagement plan schedule that will run the development of all of them. Started in December. And did our project launch, toured a little bit, got some videos. We'll do some more of that this spring when it's not as snowy. We like to put a lot of pretty pictures and things. We usually like to get the drone out and take some good aerials, that kind of thing. But this isn't the ideal time to do it, so we'll look at doing that next spring, as well as yes?
I was going to say that opening picture with the green of Coleman Park, and it was like, can we get that back quickly?
That looks real familiar to me.
It looks nice.
We'll get some more of those. Like I said, it's a great way to show off the community, a great way to get a good feeling of the existing conditions of things as well as we build this plan. But that, along with a tour of the bicycle pedestrian trails, facilities, that kind of thing, we'll all do here once the snow's gone and we can see a little bit better. Project team meetings, we've been meeting monthly with the project team, and the project team at P&Z, it came up a little bit. They're not the main steering committees for each one of these, so the Planning and Zoning Commission is the main steering committee for the comprehensive plan. The Leisure Services is the main steering committee for the bike and ped plan and the Parks and Open Space plan, and then we're working with the Golf Commission on the Memorial Park Master Plan as well. They're those primary steering bodies, those kind of local representation that'll be helping us through the process. The project team is really city staff and the consultant staff, and the purpose of that is to look at what's coming up in the next month, make sure we get on agendas like tonight, and that we kind of have that organization all down. So we have a standing meeting at the beginning of the month to discuss what's coming up, talk about engagement opportunities and that kind of thing. The other thing we're forming to help with that is Engage Waverly. And Jim, perhaps you're meeting with them when?
The 8th.
The 8th, or with the DEI folks, right. So we want to build off of some of the momentum that you've already had and bring in the rest of the community through this Engage Waverly kind of team. The idea behind that is we'll meet with them once a month once we get it set up and help push the public engagement activities and that kind of thing. We'll meet with them on Zoom, that kind of thing, make it convenient, but basically say, here's what we have coming up this month, here's what we have coming up next month, here's what's online, what else can we be posting? We have a, it's now up and running it's more than just a project website. It's a kind of an online kind of engagement platform. It allows us to do surveys and basically surveys. It allows us to do maps. It allows us to share documents, meeting dates. We can do online meetings. People can respond the normal way. They can send an email, or they can comment in an online form, or they can send a text. So we're trying to open that up, but we want to use that Engage Waverly group to really help push that out to the community through their connections and kind of expand that network that way to get as much great feedback as we can. Planning and Zoning Commission met this month for their kind of first introduction to this, as well as the Golf Commission, as I said, and then we'll meet with Leisure Services in February for their kind of kickoff and start scheduling that first community input workshop here when it gets a little bit warmer for Iowa, maybe March, we're hoping. Although it's been kind of an up and down winter, so you never know how it could turn out. We'll do a pop-up meeting, as I said, those facility tours, and this just keep going. Basically, the whole project will go until November, and we will be meeting with you guys occasionally throughout this to check in, make sure that your questions are asked, make sure that if you have constituents or people that are asking you questions that you can steer them to the right resources or let them know what's kind of going on, just to keep you in the loop. The other big concept behind that is at the end of this, you have to adopt all these plans. So we want to make sure that you're involved throughout the process and that there's no surprises at the end, that you're aware of what's going on and engaged throughout is the goal behind that. Any questions on schedule, activities? All right. So, comp planning. Who's been involved in a comp plan before? Raise your hand. All right, bunch of newbies. So you've done, because of how engaged you all are in the community, you've done all of the elements of comprehensive plan at some point. You've talked about land use, you've talked about development, you've talked about investment of the city's, kind of limited resources in continuing to improve and grow Waverly. This is a plan basically where we go out to the public and out to the entire community and try and get a lot of great feedback on how to guide all of that. Now, in the end, you're still the elected officials. You will still make the decisions on how the community grows, as the next council will after you. But we want to create really good guides for that development, and we do that through this public engagement process. Comp plans are also known as master plans, general plans. A land use plan is probably the big piece of it that a lot of people are familiar with. There's one on the wall back behind you all that is the future land use plan. It comes into play a lot of the time when we're talking about growth, development, rezoning, that type of thing. The comp plan covers all of these, basically the Iowa Smart Planning elements is what's in them, but it includes housing and transportation and mobility and all those things. Now on top of that, you guys are diving in a little deeper on a bike and pedestrian plan, which we're working with Tool Design Group as a sub-consultant on that. And then the Park and Open Space Plan and the Memorial Park Master Plan, where we have a sub-consultant, Councilman Hunziger, working with us on that as well. They're a major aquatics. They deal with that type of work all the time, and we've worked with them on several different giant aquatic facility pool projects. So, but in general, we're still looking to provide guides for growth, and we're doing it all through this public engagement process to hopefully not overwhelm people in doing a plan and then a plan and then a plan and then a plan, but kind of doing it all at once. And there's a lot of overlap in this stuff. So even when we do a comp plan, we would talk about parks, and we would talk about trails, and we would talk about open space, and we would talk about any future master park type stuff, and we would talk about in addition to the infrastructure and the community facilities and all that kind of stuff and land use that goes into a plan. We want to make sure that growth is consistent with the vision. So part of the planning process, part of the public engagement process is to define that vision through the community's involvement, and then create a growth plan and a guide for development that will help reach those goals and reach that vision. It is not a zoning ordinance or subdivision regulations. That's one thing we always point out. We'll point it out at most of the meetings because that it gets confused a lot sometimes. Those are tools for the implementation of a comprehensive plan and other basically functions of a municipal government. But this is not that. This is a guide. It is a legal document in that you have to have a comprehensive plan if you want to have zoning in Iowa. But it is not an implementation tool in itself. Why do we plan? Improve quality of life, anticipate and shape changes. We want to form a good basis for implementation, to guide capital improvements, to guide growth, and basically we want to help create a good place to live and work that has reasonable fees and taxes, is livable, adequate services, and is attractive for the most part. So what you have now, continuing it for the next 20 years and getting that community feedback on what that vision is for 20 years from now. Again, develop a consistent guide for future growth. I say guide a lot because we really kind of want to make sure that people understand that it's a guide. That we're not coming up with a new ordinance. We're not coming up with some, horrible top-down, you're going to do this or else type thing. It's a guide, and it will be used, and it will be changed, and it will be amended. That map back there, when you guys, Bill, you said you guys updated in 20, yeah, and it gets updated sometimes when there's any future land use request and that kind of thing. It's not meant to be static. That's why we build not just a map. We don't make just the map. We make a plan to go with it. So all of those questions that come up that nobody could have thought about now, you have goals and a vision and some other resources to review those and make the best decision in the future as well. So create those goals and policies that are consistent with what we get from the public feedback. That is identify those development regulations and things that need to be updated potentially in the future to be consistent in implementing the plan, And then finally, something that has a lot of public participation and a variety of engagement activities. So we've designed a program that will basically do all of those things to meet those objectives. Now, my first question for the work session of this is, what are some of the objectives that you are really, really important to you that you want to make sure are part of our planning process as we go through this?
I would like to see us identify areas where we're expecting housing growth, and especially affordable housing growth.
Okay.
I'm also going to say I'd like to figure out where we're going to have more connector roads around town. If I look at the north and kind of northeast corner where there's, what do I call it, a big river in the way, it makes it hard to get around, and I'd like to know kind of, as we expand in that direction, where we're going to have those connector roads.
Okay.
Yeah, I would second the importance of the affordable housing, especially with the 2 new elementary schools that are going to be going in on what is now the outskirts of town.
Mm-hmm.
And then we just finalized the sale of a large piece of property on the western edge of town, and I think there really needs to be thought put into what type of housing goes in, and I think we need to think outside the box more than we have in the future about, small single-dwelling houses, nice looking, not one of those subdivisions where everything looks the same. And I think also, how do we message that, the need for that type of housing to the community? Then as far as the parks go, I think we need guidance on the bridges, like the Nestle Bridge, the investment in our rail trail. How do we phase that? How do we phase the development of Memorial Park so that we can afford to do it? Mm-hmm. Those are some of the biggest points for me.
I think prioritizing some of these things, we've both, the council that has spoken already, talk about housing, and that to me says family. Mm-hmm. So we need to think about kids and what is there to do here for kids specifically. Right now we have a pool. We're getting new ball diamonds. I'm sure other people can think of more things, but those are some very big things, I think, that are very important. Parks as well. So things for families to do together, so that, yes, we're going to have housing, but what are they going to do here? Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's important to make sure that whatever sections we have devoted to housing have green space included. We have subdivisions where the green space is basically a retention pond area that's dry part of the time and really is not a place you're going to play. But that's what was able to be put in for the green space. So I think we need to be more intentional about park space that's easily accessible from various parts of town.
Okay.
As well as, park spaces that are accessible to all people regardless of physical ability, all-inclusive playgrounds, et cetera.
I think I agree with what's been said, but another element is whether past councils have talked about we don't have a lot of industrial park space, and whether it's the traditional industrial park with a manufacturing kind of basis to it, or even a newer tech type of business area. Where do we have in town, or what areas could be developed in town with access, with road access, that would allow for, again, future development, diversification of the economy? What kind of, again, outside the box type thinking could be out there in terms of how can we grow Waverly beyond just what we've got?
Mm-hmm. Especially on the entrance roads to town, I think there's sort of a hodgepodge of mixed residential and almost industrial commercial, especially on the, Highway 3 East heading out of town. So how do we make it attractive and more organized, you know, on the entrances to town?
Okay.
Well, and kind of with what Tim was talking about, I'd like to see us leverage some of our technology. We have really good internet. We have really good support for what I would call high technology companies. You know, it'd be nice to have some sort of a incubator or startup opportunity where people could try out ideas and see if you can start up a company. And I think that we have the infrastructure. We just need to make it easily available for companies that want to try something.
I'd like to just say a couple of words about the bike and pedestrian trail plan. I think it's bike and pedestrian accessibility has been an afterthought in just about all the planning we've done here, in my opinion at least. And very little thought has been given to how we interconnect the different parts of the city into a usable system for pedestrians and bicyclists, because now they're pretty much restricted to riding on city streets, with a few exceptions. So I guess I would like to see how we can retrofit a system to tie together the various parts of the community into one cohesive unit.
Okay.
And that would be my goal for the bike and pedestrian part. The parks and open space plan, I guess there I would just, that is an area that I think is incredibly important, but I have no expertise in. I would just love to see what kind of fantastic space, what's the word right now is, it's not space making, but something like that. Placemaking. There it is. And I know that that's kind of a catchphrase now, but something that people say, boy, that is fantastic, and you see a picture of it, immediately people say, that's Waverly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Excellent.
Especially for Memorial Park. I mean, it's not common that a city has that much land to play with, so to speak, and to redesign. And so, of course, we don't want it to be astronomical in price, but I agree with Rod. I think we need to do something that's unique and whether it plays on Waverly's heritage or however you want to do it, but something that people want to go gather there. And right now we have sections of that space, like Kids Kingdom and the pool, but the rest of it really doesn't get much use except for a couple times a year.
Okay.
And so how can we capitalize on, that's invaluable to have that space. So how can we make sure we make the most out of it?
You're probably aware that we're getting a new highway bridge over the Cedar River, and there's been a ad hoc group that's been working with the DOT on some design aspects of that bridge, which I would hope that we'd be able to meet with your people so that we could have that all as part of the whole package of design. But one of the ideas that I had, which got shot down pretty quickly, was to build on the German heritage here in Waverly and have a gatehouse clock tower as part of the entrance to the bridge, along with crenellated battlements rather than a railing overlooking the river, so we could keep those Decorah Vikings from coming down the river and attacking us.
Don't forget the gargoyles.
And the DOT said, oh yeah, we can do that, no problem.
Well, then she didn't even get to the DOT. The DOT probably wouldn't be concerned about it as long as it was on city property and didn't affect the bridge. But most of the other people in the group thought that was maybe a little bit too ambitious.
I laugh about your Decorah comment. My wife is a Luther grad, and when I said tonight, I was like, I'm going to Waverly tonight for a meeting, and she's like,
We say the same thing when we go to Decorah for sports.
Julie and I are Luther grads, so be careful.
The only comment, and I know that it's not your first rodeo, nor is it Jim or Shannon's first rodeo at doing this, but it goes process-oriented, not the outcome, but it does result to outcome, I guess, or results. But if you go to Memorial Park right now, there's nobody using the skate park. There's nobody using the pool. there's nobody using the softball diamonds. So a lot of those individuals, those groups are silent. Obviously, a lot of the biking community is dormant right now. They're silent. So soliciting those opinions, are very seasonal. And I look at the timeline, and I would like to think that there's time between sometime in June when the pool's open to be able to solicit some, input from, pool goers to Hunziker, correct? Or being out, at one of the trailheads to talk to bikers or, whatever. So that we just don't miss those because, again, it's hit or miss with the skate park, clientele that really reaching out to those individuals.
Okay, excellent.
I'd like to kind of emphasize one of Rod's points with regard to the bike and pedestrian trail system. I'd like to see us put a real focus on being pedestrian friendly in general, not just on the trail system, but Waverly is a town where it could be really easy for people to walk pretty much everywhere. Brian can attest to that. and I think we counted up one night when we were talking about it, maybe 3 people in town that we know walk almost everywhere they go or ride their bikes almost everywhere they go. But if we could incorporate that into part of Waverly's personality logistically by making it easy and safe, and then also make it be part of the community that we are, that it's easy to get around, it's easy to access almost anything, and you don't have to get into a car to do it.
So make it part of our identity in the community.
Excellent.
Well, I'm going to point out one thing that I don't know if it's part of this plan, but I want to mention it anyway. I would love to find a way to get our bicycle trails connected with some of the larger trails around Iowa. I mean, I know that there's this huge network of trails that goes from pretty much Cedar Falls down to Cedar Rapids. And I wish that somehow Waverly was connected to them.
Okay.
Now, granted, that's outside of Waverly, then I don't know what we can do, but it's still something I think we want to have as a vision.
Yep. Yeah, that type of stuff is still within the realm of the comp plan. It's, it's not one of those like, hey, start buying up property to the south and annexing and off we go, but it's definitely, there are pieces of the implementation plan that talk about intergovernmental collaboration. So work with your regional partners, work with that type of thing to, so that when the DOT, when they start talking about redoing a road, or when they start talking about extending a trail, or somebody else is doing it, that they're like, oh yeah, Waverly was interested in that. They've been at that, they had their representative at that committee meeting that's been there for the last year, and we haven't done anything. That type of, that regional system is still very important and part of a comp plan.
I see James wants to stake a flag in CN if they close the rail at any point in time.
Yeah. Annexation thing, give me a little.
Sorry. Hey, at least it wasn't eminent domain.
It'd have to be depending on the direction.
Okay.
Excellent.
Oh my God.
Well,
speaking of derailed,
if any more right here, because we got the SWOT analysis too at the end here to help. We can dive into some of this. All right, we'll move forward. So engagement activities. Again, what we've done, project launch, project team meetings are monthly. That engagement platform is up and running. I'm still populating a bunch of stuff, meetings and that kind of thing. But there are some questions up there that somebody could go to easily, and all the existing documents. So the existing plans are up there. Even they're on your city website as well. But somebody could go just to that website and find all that information, as well as contacts and a brief kind of intro survey, which also covers the SWOT analysis. Jim's meeting in February with the DEI to start kicking off that Engage Waverly formation process. Tonight, we're meeting with you folks as our first introduction to talk about your expectations and what you want out of this plan, and some of your thoughts on strengths and weaknesses, and then in February, we'll meet again, we'll meet with the Leisure Services and then the Golf Commission again as well. So, and start on our first task. So under each one of these, and this presentation will be up on the website as well, so if somebody was like, oh, I didn't get a chance to see that, and they could probably watch the video you guys have, or you can just tell them to go to the website and the PowerPoint will be up there as well. But we're working on basically the first tasks in each one of those plans and starting to put those together.
And that's the city website you're referring to, or
No,
is there a
it's
separate
this,
website?
it's a separate.
Okay,
Yeah.
publicinput.com, okay.
But there's a link on from the city
Right.
website.
I have not put that up yet because we just got it live last week, and so I've been making sure that things work, but yes, there will be, certainly. All right, SWAT activity. So who's done one of these before? All right. So basically, we won't take too much time because I don't want to keep you guys all night, but I do appreciate you taking the time to have us in and work through some of this stuff and kind of get an introduction, get your questions asked, get some feedback from you. We've talked about some of this stuff in terms of like where do you want to see growth, what areas provide opportunities for redevelopment, what do you want to envision the character be. These are the kind of questions we ask people to think about as they start these SWOT analysis. And the reason I have, we do this with every group that we meet with. We did it with the Planning and Zoning Commission. We did it with the Golf Commission. We'll do it with Leisure Services. There's similar questions on that engagement website right now. We'll do the same thing at the Community Engagement Workshop. At the first pop-up meeting, we'll do the same thing. So we start to build this kind of idea of what are the objectives, what are some of the strengths, what are some of the weaknesses, what are some of the opportunities and the threats that we can use as we guide this plan. So again, the strengths are the things we can take advantage of. The heritage. I liked what you said about you could probably walk a lot of places if that was part of the identity and the character, you know what I mean? Like, and it was safe because it is a very compact in a certain sense. Now there's growing areas and that kind of thing, but if you lived near downtown or you went to school or you were working at school and living somewhere, it's a pretty easy walk and it's a nice downtown. It's got a river. There's a lot of different things to take advantage of. That's a strength. Now opportunities might be those things that are outside. What housing types could we look at that we don't have right now that are an opportunity for us to continue to grow families of all different types and of different backgrounds. Threats, what are those things that are coming from outside that are challenging our growth or challenge how we do things, challenging our character, challenging redevelopment, that type of thing. And then the weaknesses are what have we not addressed that we should? Kind of think of it in those realms. But we split it into three kind of basic categories and then go through the plan from there. The first one is beautification. And we leave these kind of open for a reason because beautification can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But we used to do this by going through each one of the elements like economic development, housing, transportation, community facilities. People got worn out after 3. They were like, I'm done. So we just keep it to 3. So let's go through real quick. We'll take 3-4 minutes. If you have any additional, because we got a lot on these objectives, additional things to add that would relate to beautification. Good or bad?
Well, I think we need to enhance our river.
Yeah, I was thinking river.
When you say enhance access, enhance what the identity of it is with the community, it's not just a thing that we can only get across on these 3 bridges every once in a while?
Yeah.
Okay.
How we can use it, how we can,
For so long, it's been seen as dangerous.
Okay.
Right? It was a source of flooding, a source of damage. Some of that's now mitigated, with the dry run project and the dam and other projects. But yeah, access. How do you get people near it and using it, whether it's to fish or kayak or, whatever.
Or it's hard to walk along the river.
It's hard to walk along. Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay. What else? Beautification.
Well, I think the rail trail. I just think it's beautiful, and I think a lot of people access it from Nestle on maybe to a mile or so, but how can we encourage people to go past that, go past Cedar River Parkway and, or access it at other points, or, and how can we, it's a bit of a threat too, right? Because it's costly to maintain, and how do we make sure that the citizens want to invest in it for the long haul?
Well, kind of going along with that, one of the things I'm really happy about is our new bridge, the Cedar Parkway Bridge, because for the first time we now have a loop. It used to be you could go out on the trail, you could turn around, you can come back.
Right.
And I really like having a trail loop.
Yep.
It makes it easier to use, it's more interesting. It'd be nice to have more of those.
Okay.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing out towards my neighborhood. I know that, there's that little creek and an anticipated connection. It's not the rail trail that would be the loop that would come back up to Bremer Avenue and across from, Dikey all the way in Life Church that way, but that would be an extended loop, where you could have a short loop, the one that you're talking about, an extended one, and then the long one is all the way out to 39th.
All right. I think as far as an issue or a threat, weakness, I don't know, is kind of a community buy-in and a consistency.
Okay.
Certainly, we've heard council, things like the planners on Bremer, the benches, et cetera, whether that ties in with other things previously, even something like the band shell performance amphitheater was a major issue in terms of how does that tie in, and so we kind of have, there is always some pushback from the community as to why are you doing this, what's the purpose of this, why is this worth doing. So the value to what we're doing, as well as making sure that it kind of makes sense that it all, we don't have one area that's all greens and, and another area that's a whole different setup, and, one area of town that's German and, castles and stuff, and another area.
Just in the middle.
We don't want randomness. I think part of what we run into is, and maybe it's the German heritage, I don't know, but people are very frugal, right? And they don't see recreation and leisure as worthy, right? As fixing the sewer, fixing the street. And so how do we help them see that to be an attractive city that's going to continue to grow and attract people of all types, that beautification isn't shallow and it's not a waste of money. And because change is really difficult to persuade people that change is not a threat, that change is opportunity, and sometimes you just try out change, and maybe you do it as a pilot project. Sometimes it's permanent. But, we ran into that when we tried to develop the area where the old Irving School was, and staff had some really good ideas for what could go there, and we, the neighborhood, and other people too were, I think, well, the word that comes to mind is threatened, but that might be too strong, but they were nervous about it. And so how can we help people see the potential that a little spot like that has for housing? That's not going to ruin the neighborhood. Right. That could potentially be affordable, could be attractive, and isn't, change doesn't have to be a threat.
Right. I like you guys, a few of you now have said, show the value of that change and that type of thing. And as planners, and you guys probably see it all the time as well, the thing I was inevitably in every process, in every meeting, there's a certain point where you are faced with this vocal group that basically is like, well, this place needs help, but don't change anything. And it is that juxtaposition of, okay, but in order to grow, in order to be continue to be competitive in that growth, because it's not like people are deciding whether to come to Waverly or go nowhere. They're deciding between here and other places. Employers are, people are, all those types of things. And yeah, those amenities are important, and being able to educate and show the value of those to people that aren't going to use them, it's hard. I always think about schools too. You talk to people who don't have kids in school, and they're like, I don't care about that. Well, the people that employ children want them to be educated. If you ever want to sell your house and your school district is not good, that's an uphill climb. Like there's lots of benefits to that, even if it isn't direct to you, and showing people that overall value is important, and this process can help with that. Yep. What else? We can move on to development. That's a fun one.
I wanted to make just one.
Perfect.
This is a small thing, but as we were talking about the trails, before COVID, I think the summer before COVID, there were reported incidences, a number of them on the trails, threatening the safety, particularly of women. And, then COVID came and nobody's been using them, so we haven't heard so much. But I think we're going to be taking a critical look at the trails and all kinds of recreation and so on. And I think that's important for us to keep in mind. What can we do to make sure that not only they are safe, but the people that are using them feel safe?
I do think that's an issue farther out on the trail. It's pretty isolated. Whether we need to think about, like they have at the Wartburg parking lots, the safety.
The blue.
Yeah, or something, I do think that's a good point.
Okay.
But I saw it especially the first, 6 to 9 months of the pandemic, I think there were more people out and about than I've ever seen, because it's the only thing you could do, right? And so, and I walk a lot, and you can walk just about anywhere in Waverly in 30 minutes. If you walk briskly, and it's not icy, right?
Like tonight.
But, so we do have and we have beautiful neighborhoods in all sections of town, and so how can we facilitate that, where people aren't just walking for exercise, maybe they do walk to school, or they walk to church, or they do whatever, and won't get hit by a car.
Right.
Because we don't have drivers that, we talk about this almost every meeting, right? The lights are flashing and people drive through and they ignore pedestrian crossings, and what can we do about that? So I think anything we can do to make this all more visible, and it's normal to walk around, not just if you've lost your driver's license. Right.
It's not a punishment. I really just wanted to walk. It was a nice day.
Yeah,
Our office is in Ankeny. It's on a really busy road, and it's a suburban area, and I feel so bad about the people walking, because you do get that from motorists. Like that, it's like, oh, someone... It's a nice 8-foot sidewalk. It's a trail that connects like all the way down. Like these people are probably just walking because they wanted to get out for lunch,
Right.
But there is that, yeah.
So I do wonder about that with where the new elementary schools are going to be, right? So how they aren't, especially the one north of town, it's not really well connected if you're going to walk or ride your bike.
I would say that came up at the P&Z meeting too. That kind of area. Yep. Okay.
It's a little bit isolating.
It'll fill in, but it'll be a while. And how do you make sure that fill in, because once the school goes in, it's going to put growth pressure on that area. How do you make sure that as those subdivision plats come in, that they're thinking about connectivity that isn't just, how do I get a car from here to there?
That made me think of something here. We're talking about comprehensive use planning. Waverly's still a small town. People can get anywhere to anywhere fairly quickly. But as we start building these subdivisions out on the edges of town, and we start getting more and more of those out there, we really don't have commercial amenities for people in their neighborhoods, like a convenience store or a restaurant or something along those lines. Those are all packed either downtown or out on 4th Street. So if I'm living out in a new subdivision over by the school someplace out there, and I want to get a sandwich or I need to put gas in my car, I'm going to have to drive all the way into town. Now, for people that live in Chicago, they're probably going, boo-hoo, that's just too bad. But when you look at residential neighborhoods, even in cities like that, there are those kinds of commercial amenities that are close to them that people can walk to. They don't have to get in a car and drive to go to do that stuff. So that might be something to keep in mind as we're looking at future use.
Yeah, and is that feasible for a town our size? You know, there's a neighborhood in Ames, and I'm sorry, it's on the north side, sort of north of campus, and it's a mixture of residential and restaurants, and there's a fairway, I think, and so it's very walkable. It's sort of like a town within a town.
Yeah.
And would something like that be feasible for a community our size?
Okay.
And it's good to get that in your comprehensive plan to start with, because I can tell you from personal experience, and partly it's my fault, that residential neighborhoods do not like to have commercial things carved out once the neighborhood is established.
It's a hard upsell.
It is very hard.
And it's a lot easier when it's all planned out and.
Right.
All right, raise your hand if you're a realtor.
You're good.
Okay, so never, when a realtor says, oh, that's going to be that forever, don't listen. Look at the future land use map.
Right.
Like, that is the only thing I would say. Look at the future land use map, because that is sometimes the only way that you could do that, because you can't do it after the fact. After it's developed, unless it's already established. Now, it doesn't have to be zoned. I wouldn't say zone it and they'll come, but it at least has to be in the land use plan so that people can say, hey, this has been on the books since 2022, you know? Yeah.
It makes me think about I can never remember the name of that neighborhood, but along Green Hill in Cedar Falls, when 15 or 20 years ago, John Deere said, I'm going to create a community within a community here, and we're going to have health care and dining and recreation and everything. I remember reading that article and going, they've got to be crazy. And it's there. And I know we're not Cedar Falls, but as you're describing that, I think that's a good example of where that's happened.
But I think that fits right into this particular conversation, that Waverly has its own regional atmosphere for draw, and that's a strength. Cedar Falls and other communities nearby also have their own regional draw. Some are bigger, and that's the threat. So, playing off of that, that's a threat, because some people, see that neighborhood established, and that's the type of neighborhood I'm looking for. We don't have a neighborhood like that. We have a community like that, but we don't have a neighborhood like that. And so going back to what Rod had mentioned as far as having those neighborhood amenities, it doesn't have to be another Walmart or such, but
Yeah, the right scale.
Yeah.
Not every new subdivision doesn't need a, its own grocery store type thing, but convenience store, something like that. Small little strip mall for some services or some, amenities, that type of thing. Yep. Well, since we've already moved into development, we'll just continue with development. And we've talked a little bit about mobility as well. So because I have taken up a lot of your time, we'll just take a few minutes and see if there's any other pluses and minuses. And I would encourage you, so obviously if you go online, you can fill out more stuff. You can email us if you come up with something, if you have some more thoughts. Or when we have the community engagement meeting, come to that. I'm more than happy to have you guys participate in this process as much as you would like. And we are at your, we're happy to answer any questions you have or help anybody out if they come to you and you're, steer them to us. We're happy to help you out. So, any other thoughts on development or mobility?
I think maybe something we've identified as a real weakness here for development is the lack of different types of housing and diversity in housing, as particularly as you get into more affordable starter homes, townhomes, that kind of thing that we really have been not very good at developing.
Yep.
And I also, I think about the southwest area, sort of past Walmart, where recently we've had people wanting to sort of split up farmland, but into fairly large parcels for a house. So I wonder about...
McMansions kind of thing? The McMansions?
No, not really McMansions, but where they, and I can't remember the specifics, but where they will carve off a few acres and a person is going to put a house there.
Okay.
And so I wonder if, is the city going to spread that direction? What do we want down there? Do we want to continue that sort of subdivision? And because really right now we're moving west, and with the school we're going to be moving north. There's some development to the east, and then there's just a lot of farmland out there that's sort of getting chopped into pieces.
I'd call them mini acreages.
Mini acreages, yeah. And so I wonder, is that what we want down there?
If it's, we'll take a look at it. So here's an interesting thing, because we're talking about housing and affordable housing, right? There's the starter part of affordable housing, but then there's also I make a lot of money and I want to stay here. This house is too small. Where can I go? You really want to have a place for everything in between, in terms of when we develop a land use plan. You want the starter homes, you want the people that are empty nesters, you want the retirees, you want the people that are moving into their forever home kind of thing, and and looking to upgrade, because that frees up a lower, a more affordable house for somebody, because we all have an affordability range, right? We all make a certain amount that we're willing to spend on a house. You want to make sure you have space for all of that, at least at the market level. And then the next step is to find a way to entice builders and market it and that type of thing. So we do approach it in kind of that total aspect. I want to make sure that a new teacher has a place where she can live in town, or he can live in town, and as well as somebody who's, has made a bundle of money, has a great business in town, and wants to stay here and is looking to move up into a bigger home with some land, kind of an acreage sort of thing. So you want to have all of it.
Well, the big thing we've heard a lot about from particularly employers or businesses that are wanting to locate is having houses for their workers to come in. It's not just the school system or
workforce housing.
Yeah, it's more workforce housing for some of these either manufacturers or smaller businesses that are working there. As far as the development and something to think about, as far as when we look at it, if you even just look back at the land use map, we basically in town have, an area along Bremer Avenue basically is business along Bremer Avenue. 4th Street to the south is business. Got a little bit going out towards the airport, a little bit of business there. And we have a huge amount of residential. And so when we talk about residential, yes, it's a great idea to make sure but we want to make sure we're having spaces for businesses, so we're not slapping businesses right next to residential communities like Rod was talking about, that we're not going into older parts of town and saying we're going to start carving this out so that we want to have that kind of plan. So there is, again, accessibility for people, that there's places for these businesses to develop within or in concert with the residential development.
Excellent. I think some of what Andy was talking about is we're seeing more and more acreages along our commercial corridors.
Okay.
So your featured land use is not conducive of what they're allowing the county or who to pop in these little acreages right on an area that you want to be a commercial corridor, and you see it on every single one of them heading west. Right. So that may be more of the issue of having acreages. It's where they're at on our corridors.
Okay, so these are the ones that are they're a threat to urban growth in that sense, because they may not. They're basically it's an investment in what would be probably a more dense development based on location.
I'm going to say it's also creating future conflict.
Yeah.
I mean, we're basically saying, okay, this is going to be commercial, and then someone puts one of these acreages, and then there's commercial all around. I mean, I'm thinking of an example on our 10th Avenue. We've got this area that's kind of staked out to be commercial development, and I know there's one person who's got a home there who keeps complaining that the speed limit is too high because it's going past his house too fast.
Right.
And I think that, we want to, maintain those connector roads as commercial zones, and they should be, I think 10th Avenue is a great example of that's a commercial area where as soon as you get off that street, you're in residential. So if you want to put those convenience stores, those commercial businesses that service residential, that's a great place for it.
Right.
But we want to keep the residential off the connector roads.
Right. Yep. Yeah, it's in close proximity, but in non-conflict. I think conflict's a great word for it, because it is a potential future land use conflict between similar uses, compatible uses, but they have to be done compatibly in order for it to work.
And the problem is when those get out there somehow ahead of the game, then they get upset when the commercial zone grows around them.
Yep.
And then how do we improve communication with the county to discuss that, right? So if you look at the north entrance past our airport, the north entrance onto the highway, to the 4-lane highway, perfect. Seems like it would be a great place for commercial, but that's not what's been put out there.
In the county's plan at that.
I guess, right? And so there's a house out there, and there's some sort of garage. I'm not sure what that is, but and that would have been a nice place for gas station or restaurant or something that people coming by could use, and there's stuff there now that's not going to move, it's not going anywhere, and so we can't then develop that.
The only thing we have at our disposal is the 2-mile zoning, outreach.
Yep. Extraterritorial stuff, which, you get a review, but
right. So how do we improve? How do we improve
that's it.
You hope you can, well, at least with this plan, you've been using the one now with that, but certainly we can look at that.
You can look at the land use plan where Ann's talking about it, and it is future land future land use, the red going all the way out as commercial.
And it's not. And will not be.
We will do our best. We'll involve them in the process and help you out as you continue to implement. Well, I have taken up more time than I anticipated, but I think this was a fantastic conversation.
Oh, that Jim has.
And I really appreciate you guys having us here tonight. I really appreciate you guys working with us on this project over the next, 10 months, 11 months. And again,
Chris, before you sign off, I have 2 things.
Sure.
And very quickly, and I want you to make sure you write these down because they're very important to me.
Got it.
Castle with a moat.
Castle. No.
Drawbridge.
One issue, and I know this is on everyone's mind, is the rail trail bridge over the Cedar River.
Okay.
And I know that will come up in a lot of your conversations, but that's something that we need to have some help in determining what to do with that situation, whether it should be replaced or not or whatever. The second thing is a project that is near and dear to me, and we talked about it at our budget sessions on Saturday, and I want to bring it up to make sure that it gets out in front of everyone, is that when we're dealing with the bike and pedestrian trail system, I would really love to see your recommendation as to having a pedestrian crossing light on the Cedar River Parkway between the Ball Diamonds and the soccer fields.
Okay.
If that is something that you would think is appropriate or not appropriate, or what recommendation you'd have on that one specific item.
Okay.
I'm going to piggyback on that. Lighted crossings at the end of Cedar River Parkway where it dead ends into Highway 3. So that's an area that I think needs a crosswalk as well.
Okay.
And then was it baritone chimes in the bell tower?
No, actually, it would have a little guy standing there collecting tolls. So he thought that would be a good idea.
All right. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you all.
Just a basket. All right. I'll let you continue to pack up as we transition to item number 2, the review of the Subdivision Sidewalk Infill Program. Mr. Browner, if you have introduction to this?
Turn it
Or?
over to Mike or Bill and kind of working through this whole process and
Okay.
legal issues surrounding it.
I'll start. I'll get the easy stuff taken care of. So it was about a year ago, almost a year ago, February 15 of 21, where we reviewed this. And so if you had a chance to look through the agenda memo, we've got some of the background historical information there. And then based off of the updated Sidewalk Infill program, the resolution that was adopted by City Council, we went through and looked at the criteria and identified those infill lots that would meet that criteria. So as you flip through the various subdivisions, the ones that the lots that are identified in yellow would be the ones that meet the criteria. The ones that are in blue would be exempt. Some of them are kind of a head scratcher when you first look at them, but it's probably because of a change in ownership that the current owner of the vacant lot has been in possession of it for less than 2 years. And one of the criteria was a new owner would have to be in possession for more than 2 years in order for it to qualify under the program. So as you flip through there, I believe there are 9 vacant lots that would meet the criteria, 4 of them in one subdivision alone. Does that inspire any questions or any thoughts? Because based off of the policy that was approved, and I think that policy was reviewed and considered by the council as in follow-up to some concerns by citizens out in the community that some of these subdivisions, decades, they've been under development, and some of these vacant lots, if you look at, I think DL have this page here, the very last one maybe, under the subdivision on the right-hand column, it shows the date that those were accepted by the city. So we got some that go back to 2004, 2006. So those are going on 16, 17 years old and still have some vacant lots and gaps in the sidewalk system. In those locations, they typically tend to be not by the original developer, but owned by an individual that's just kind of sitting on it, either as an investment or maybe they had thoughts of developing and then maybe the situation changed at some point and they just haven't decided what to do with the lot. So as I think was maybe indicated to, I don't know if it was last Saturday or previous meeting, that there maybe been some changes in some laws and regulations and that is maybe going to make it a little more challenging for the city to complete an infill program. Not that we can't. Certainly if you give us direction to proceed forward, we can do that. But there are some additional procedural requirements that the city will have to initiate to make that happen. And with that, I will let Bill fill you in on some of those changes to the assessment laws.
So when you talk about requiring somebody to infill later, when they haven't been required to infill when they build a house, and generally it's in lots within a subdivision where most of the houses have been built out, and there's a few that haven't been built out, which makes it a much more difficult situation because you really have that connection that there's a lot of people walking because most of the houses are there and people want to use the whole neighborhood. In the past, or historically, since I've been doing real estate law, you had subdivisions that build out kind of incrementally, and so they really filled as they went. they'd do the first 12, the first 10, they'd move to the next 10, 12, and so you basically, everybody got filled in all the way out in a fairly quick manner. That's difficult for developers because they don't like to guarantee that the sidewalk's going to be put in by themselves, because generally in the past they would have promised to have it done fully built out within 4 years or 5 years or 3 years, whatever the community adopted. And so you expected that all the lots were going to be filled within that 5-year period, and they had a performance guarantee to make sure that the sidewalks would get done by the end of that 5 years, whether there's a house or not. And generally speaking, they were really pushing to get the house in because they didn't want to put a sidewalk in where there wasn't a house. So what we get into is subdivisions that didn't move so fast, that didn't build out so fast. You get developers that don't want to build as fast. They want to space their sales out. Maybe it's an income thing. Maybe it's and if they've built out a lot of lots and at the same time, if you have 37 lots and you have 5 years to fill them out, you're probably not going to get it done. So there was a push made in this community to kind of go a different direction and start doing it by the subdivision requirement that basically, and the ordinance that was passed that said that if you hadn't done it within so many years, you were responsible for filling it in, whether you had a house there or not. Generally, you don't see a lot of that happening unless there's somebody that just does not want to put in a house, and we've had that happen now the last couple of years where the folks have agreed to put in the sidewalks in those areas. As you start getting into a broader range of the types of lots that are sitting there without sidewalks, we have subdivisions where the subdivisions have moved slow, and so we still have a couple that are, you have 2 here and 2 here, and probably fit the criteria for asking them to fill in the sidewalks. But the mechanism that folks have been using is to kind of treat them as making someone fix their sidewalk or repair their sidewalk or replace their sidewalk. And what has become clear under the law is that you can go in and tell somebody that they have to put a sidewalk in, but you have to do it like you do a regular project. So when we were on Bremer Avenue and we were putting in a new sidewalk, or we were putting in, if you have a new road, you're putting in curb and gutter, you could assess that against, at least a part of that against the adjoining landowner. Because there was a personal benefit for that landowner as well as a public benefit for the rest of the public. But what they said by doing that is you have to gauge the amount of personal and public benefit. So you can use that assessment process, but it isn't necessarily going to make them do the whole thing. So in what we're trying to look at is if we have those areas where they really need to get infilled because they've been not connected for a long time, you can do a project where you front the money, and then you go back and do a project where you try to assess part of that cost of that project back against the landowners. And you'll still have to try to determine how much of that would be public benefit as opposed to the private benefit of the person who lives there. So it's a little bit unknown because there's been some court cases that have clarified that recently. So we can do things like, let's do a project, let's make these 9 lots get sidewalks. Let's make those landowners put those in for specific reasons or criteria that you determine. We do the same thing we do where we basically estimate the cost of the improvement, we put it on a schedule, we give public notice of it, we'd have public hearing, we'd have an approval process, and you would assess it back like we've done on our water services or sewer services that we're doing on new roads. It's a lot more lengthy process, although we know how to do it, and we've done it several times in the last 5 to 10 years. So it isn't something we can't do. It's just a little bit more unwieldy process. You have to look at both how you get the infills fixed now and get those done, because people really need the connection because they want to walk. They don't want to get into the street and go around a grassy lot. with the idea of how do you do that in the future when you're trying to get subdivisions to keep moving quickly so that they can get those sidewalks done without having to push them later on, 5 or 10 years down the road. And so that's a different discussion than tonight, but that's a discussion you'll probably have to face at some point. Do we keep using the procedure where we say the developers aren't going to be responsible if they're not done in 5 years? It's just the whoever owns the lot, and it could be the bank, it could be an investor, it could be somebody who hopes in 5 years they can put a new house on it, but they just want to get the lot bought. And those are tough decisions to make because they're tough things to enforce, because we really do want that connectivity, especially with people pushing strollers, little kids on bikes, folks wanting to walk the neighborhood, and going into the street for that lot or two isn't the right answer. So then going back to what we're talking about today is, are there enough infill lots that you think are legitimate to go after and push, and really say, we really need to get your lots infilled at this point. And those decisions are harder to make because then you have to make judgments as to whether or not you're going to make everybody do the same thing that fits the criteria that we've already established. Whereas if there's 2 lots but not 3, you're required to infill. But if there's 3, you're not required to infill. Or do you look at the circumstances all around and just say, we're just going to make decisions on which ones we're going to pick to move forward on, and then address it that way. And I think it really is important to look at which ones are getting used, which ones have the most traffic, which ones are really the most difficult for people walking and using those sidewalks. And we can do the mandatory process. We can do the assessment process. We may not get 100%, but you're going to have to authorize 100% up front to get those projects done. And then either we get the assessment at 100% or something less than 100%, but we get it over time because it's an assessment that goes over 3 to 5 years. So it is something that you have to fund and bankroll for a period of time when it comes down to that.
But Bill, I have a real hard time looking at the fairness issue here, that we're deciding, even though somebody meets this criteria, we're deciding this landowner has to put in a sidewalk, but this landowner doesn't because someone has deemed it more important for this sidewalk to go in than that sidewalk. I mean, that's a real subjective kind of evaluation. And, the whole intent of having this resolution was that we had some objective criteria to tell people, hey, if you are investing in this lot for whatever reason, part of your responsibility is to be a good neighbor and put in a sidewalk. And if you don't do that, we're going to require that you do that. I have a real hard time. I don't have a hard time continuing this program, even if the city has to front the money and we may not be able to assess all of that back. I have a real hard time using a subjective criteria to determine who we're going to require to have a sidewalk and who we don't. We could change this criteria if that's what we need to do, but I think it needs to be some kind of a real objective criteria.
I think I was probably meaning that because I don't think you want to pick and choose between ones that meet it and then treat them differently. It really is just about your criteria because you're setting your criteria and what you're moving forward on is I guess what I'm saying is that how strict do you want to be with your criteria.
So you have recommendations of what to change this to?
I really don't in terms of it's almost like it's more of a feel because it's more if you're in that neighborhood and there's an area that has 4 or 5 or 6 lots and there's a few houses that are there, but most of them are empty lots, you kind of feel like, well, that maybe doesn't really feel like the right place. But then you get another neighborhood where there's one here and then there's one here and then there's one here. And those are the ones that are the most difficult. And those are the easiest call when one's been empty for a number of years. So it is hard to do objective criteria only because you're going to have situations where they might fit the criteria, but there's not many people there that use it. So,
but how do we know How do we know which part gets used? Right, unless you count pedestrians. Right, so we came up with these criteria, and what's been the development since then? Because some of the sidewalks have been filled in. I mean, I live in a neighborhood that didn't have one, and now it does, and it's made a huge difference. People from not just our neighborhood, but all over now walk a loop, right, because the sidewalk got filled in. And so what's been the communication with the owners of the lots that are not filled in
I don't
so
think
far?
we've had that, have we?
Because we're talking about it as if these people aren't willing to put in sidewalks, and do we know if they are?
So step one of the process is January study session. Prior to the meeting, we go out and we identify the ones that meet the criteria that have not been filled in. Then we come to the council, share that with you, and decide whether, yes, go ahead. And we felt this was important because the new criteria was established last February, and so we kind of took a pause. And so let's see where we are in January of '22. Here we are, and Bill has some information, new laws or new regulations that are going to impact the program, and so before we send notice out to these property owners, we want to make sure that everyone is on board with the criteria and continuing forward, and showing you where they're at and the number of properties that are out there. Okay?
I think there is a difference between the properties that are held by a developer who's actually still developing the subdivision. And because back then we said we would assess it against the owners. And then the criteria, I don't think the criteria was established at the time the subdivision was done. I think that's been something we talked about, how to deal with infill. So that's an after the fact explanation. I mean,
so you have certain areas that were told, the developers were told they would not have to put in a sidewalk. It would be up to the owner once it was sold.
Yeah, once they built the house.
Okay, so the city had an agreement that said that with people?
What we didn't do is we didn't do a performance bond to make them do it by the end of a certain period of time. That's what developers, I hate to say this, but in the 80s and 90s and so forth, when I was doing a lot of real estate in some of these areas in Iowa City and Coralville and others, they were moving pretty fast with those developments, so they did them in chunks where they could make sure that their houses were going to be filled and the sidewalks were going to be done. As you build slower in a community like ours, it's difficult for developers to do that. You saw that in Centennial Oaks because the developer went broke, and then the bank got the lots, and then you had some of those situations where somebody bought them after the fact, and they really bought them saying, well, I can build in 3 years, or I can build in 4 years, and for them it was only 3 or 4 years to wait, but for us it was 12.
So what are there existing agreements for some of these that the city? Okay.
No, I mean, the understanding was that we were going to turn it around and go against the then property owners.
So in your packet, you have Resolution 13-80. Okay.
Yep.
And this is the resolution that we took place of the performance guarantee being provided by the developer. So up until 2013, the developer was required to provide a performance guarantee for the sidewalk. That was typically 4 years. Then we would do a review with the city council, and the developer would if they still had unsold lots or vacant lots, they would then request extending the performance guarantee on the sidewalk for another 2 years or 4 years. In 2013, that's when it was kind of put to an end, and they said, well, one of the developers came, felt that, well, the city has the ability to go after the lot owner at that time, and that's what resulted in Resolution 13-80. I don't think in here it gives a waiver to a developer who owns the lot. I think whoever the lot owner is, whether it's privately owned or the developer, was expected to fill it in based off of a biannual review of those vacant lots by the city council.
So I'm confused. Resolution 1380, I think I'm hearing you say, kind of clarified and made it a little more across the board that this was going to get done, or that there was going to be an obligation to do it. Is it a case where it hasn't been enforced, or is it a case where there were loopholes?
Nope, we were doing it every 2 years. In January, in the off-election year, we would do it. We didn't want brand-new council members to, 2 weeks into the job, have to wrestle with reviewing the infill criteria. So for a number of years, this went on, but it was still left open to interpretation by the city council, as Bill was just describing, that well, maybe if you look at here, infill is not required. The city council will consider adding sidewalks. So it was, every one of these would have to be vetted by the city council. Every subdivision, every vacant lot, every location, every 2 years was going to be vetted by the city council. And I think, getting to your concern, where are you starting to play, how do you make that determination? They have to put it in, but you don't. And people could be looking at it going, well, it seems like it's a very similar situation. Well, you had a neighbor that complained, so you're going to have to put it in. They did not have any neighbors speak out. So that went back to last January when we had this discussion. Well, isn't there some sort of more of a policy that we could adopt that would be consistent and can be looked at? And there, we had put something together back in 2013, but they chose to go a different direction, and so we resurrected it, and that's what was approved by City Council last February.
Well, so the 1380, unless I'm reading this wrong, basically says you have to put infill in if you've built on it. Right? Infills Requirement, any lot built upon that has adjacent curbing is within a subdivision that requires sidewalk. You don't have to put infill in if it's vacant, if there's nothing on it. Right? And then they'll reconsider it in 2 years. And then we came along last year and said, well, even if it's vacant, if it's been sitting vacant for a long time, we think it ought to be infilled.
Right. So
I'm not sure why we're revisiting it, just to make sure we still think this, or why are we?
Well,
I guess we all thought it was going to be enforced. Like someone was going to contact the people and say, are you going to put a sidewalk in?
Let me just explain that the enforcement mechanism is a code section that the Supreme Court has said you can't do that with.
Okay, that's what I wish you would have said about 10 minutes ago. Okay, right? So
Right.
if they're saying that's what we needed to hear 10 minutes ago,
You can't use-
is that we can't do what we resolved a year ago, is what you're saying.
So
sort of.
there's a difference, because
It's a more extensive
the
process to do the same
Okay.
thing that it was.
the code section that has been used historically in the last how many years by a lot of cities is to use the code section that allows you to assess, to fix and replace sidewalks that should be replaced.
Okay. So
And
if we
they
want
were
to do
using
it,
it just do infill new sidewalk.
so if we want to do it, we have to go through a more thorough process,
Yes.
like we've done with other projects,
Yes.
where we do the public hearing, we contact the homeowner, say, hey, we want to do this, well, the usual procedure.
right, resolution,
Okay.
necessity, public hearing.
And you're wanting to know if we still believe strongly enough in that resolution from a year ago to have you go forward. Okay, I vote yes. I would like you to go
And
forward.
Rod's concern is the picking and choosing through that process.
Yeah, but if
Right,
we look
or
at our
deciding
wording,
who.
we tried to, make it so that it was contiguous, and if,
Right.
We did, but I can understand that there, in some certain situations where the lot is still owned by the developer, it's not been purchased by a third party. There might be something that we can have that give them little bit more leeway on that, because I can understand that situations may come up where they just haven't been able to sell the lot. My concern has always been that someone buys the lot as an investment, or they buy the lot because it's right next to their property and they want to control the property, and then they sit on it. They don't do anything with it. They don't put in a sidewalk, they don't mow it, they don't keep the snow down, they don't do anything with it. So that was what my major concern was in those situations. I'm not as concerned in a situation, even though I would like them to put in a sidewalk, but I can understand maybe there's a situation where the lot's still owned by the developer, or the bank, if the developer is no longer in possession of the property, that we might be able to make more exceptions here. And that I would be willing to entertain, but I'm not really willing to dump this whole thing just because.
You got a mixture of both.
You have a mixture of both.
And you also have developers who have chosen not to move fast on lots. Right.
How do you determine, right, who's working hard to sell a lot?
Well, if there's no advertising, there's no sign for sale, there's nothing, it's just ground, I don't think they're working to sell it right.
Yeah.
I mean, in here it says that, a vacant lot is 6 years old after dedication and acceptance. I mean, so it's basically.
Seems pretty liberal.
It's been sitting there for 6 years, vacant. And I'm assuming that it's not 3 or more adjacent lots, it's 1 or 2 lots. I think we set up good criteria here, and we should just follow through.
Well, I would be willing to give the developer more time instead of 6 years. If it's a developer, give them 10 years or something like that. But
Somebody buys a lot in the first year and they build a house and they've got kids growing up, they're going to be 10 years old before they can ride a bike on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
I guess you could have it, open to the adjacent property owners too, to some opinion. But shortly after this, I remember getting, having a couple conversations, after it was approved, and one area that was pointed out to me was just north of the high school in Heather's neighborhood there, that you look at 16th Street and then also down to.
Yeah, when we talk infill.
Well, we had an email today
Right.
about 11th Street Southwest and 4th. There's no sidewalk heading down to the parking lot there.
Right, but there's no sidewalk on this street. And the biggest part of the conversation there was right after school, the bus traffic that's coming in and all of those students that are heading to the cars that are parked in that neighborhood, which is a totally different issue, further narrows the street, especially with adverse road conditions. That was their concern, is they wish that there was an avenue for them to be off of the street.
And this has been something I've brought up and we haven't pushed, because, I mean, even when we did the sidewalk program and went through and fixed sidewalk in a lot of neighborhoods, part of the infill was brought up that, okay, there's some new subdivisions, but there's also older areas of town where there was no sidewalk required before.
Right.
And so there wasn't. One of the areas that was brought up with me was going to West Cedar School. There really wasn't any sidewalks going to West Cedar. Well, that's not going to be as much of an issue in the next few years.
Right.
But still, that neighborhood doesn't have the sidewalk.
Connectivity.
One that's always kind of bugged me is on Cedar River Drive where I live. If you go from Cedar River Drive to 7th Avenue, on the east side of Cedar River Drive, the lot right on 7th Avenue, there's no sidewalk. We did put in the pedestrian curb ramp in the corner, and there's a corner there that's got, a curb cut. And then if you go up to the end of the lot, immediately north of that, there's a sidewalk that comes, and it's actually, because of the difference in height, the sidewalk there kind of ends in a ramp. So I was kind of thought, if I was a kid, that would be a great place to go jumping my bike. But I don't know that it's, there's no sidewalk. It's a sidewalk not continuing. Part of the other issue we had with some of it was a blanket statement of putting in sidewalks led us to looking at, we were putting sidewalks that were leading into a cornfield. That was the last lot in a subdivision next to a field that wasn't being developed. Would we require somebody to put a sidewalk there?
And we didn't in the last resolution.
Or, if they were connecting to nothing else, why make somebody put a sidewalk from the end of their driveway to the end of their lot if nothing beyond that was going to be there? So now they've got 15, 20 feet of sidewalk that they have to shovel technically, legally in the wintertime, but nobody's going to be walking that in the wintertime, but they still have to shovel it because our ordinance says that. So it's a thing we need to tackle in addition to the subdivision infill. Are there areas connectivity-wise we want to put in town where we want to say to owners that are older areas of town to say we've never had a sidewalk here, but we would like to get a sidewalk in so that we have that connectivity. And what is our ordinance, what is our mechanism for doing that and getting that put in place?
Well, I have to say that the area up there by the high school, the one that we got an email about, I think that area is very important. Because kids, there's nothing. And the kids walk there all the time. It's in the grass. They'll go on to the road. And that is very heavy traffic. The road just west there, 12th, I think, does not have sidewalks. I don't necessarily think that needs sidewalks. Kids typically are walking on the grass, or sometimes they go out on the road, but you see a main throughway, and maybe they should take the actual sidewalk, and if there was a connected sidewalk on 11th, maybe they would take that then, versus just walking down 12th. But some of these, I'm looking at, I think it's Robertson Road, you have a whole neighborhood and one just no sidewalk, right smack in the middle of the sidewalk, or in the middle of the neighborhood, and that's connectivity to me. Yeah. The older neighborhoods that don't even have sidewalks, they're still connected, I guess. They just don't have sidewalks. But this one here that I'm looking at, Robertson Road, right smack in the middle of the neighborhood, no sidewalk.
Well, I think it's a conversation we need to have about, do the whole neighborhoods that don't have sidewalks, do we need to talk to them about whether we need to add sidewalks? It's another conversation about infill, right? Like you say, where we got a whole neighborhood where there's sidewalks and there's one gap.
I think
I think that's different. Or like we got an email today about the end of 11th Street, that street does have sidewalks, and then there's a big chunk of no sidewalk. And I don't know if that's school property.
It is.
We had a discussion, if I remember correctly, in the spring of 2018, where Mike brought us some schematics of areas in the city where there were sidewalks missing for maybe a block. There'd be a sidewalk in the two blocks on either side of it, but no sidewalk on that block or part of it. And if I remember, our discussion at that point was that it was probably unnecessary to force everyone to have a sidewalk, because it require, putting sidewalks through trees, and just people were not real happy about that. But there might be some situations like the ones that you're talking by the school where for safety reasons or for whatever other reason that there should be a sidewalk there. Now, I know we had that discussion. I'm not sure if that ever resulted in any kind of resolution or not. I'd have to go back and look at the minutes, but that's probably, like you said, a different issue than what we're talking about here with the infill.
Yeah, I think that the terms we came up with last year are pretty good. We tried to be practical about it, and I think it's worth reaching out to the property owners and see what they say. I think 6 years is a long time to hold on to a lot, and I realize that sometimes things don't sell, but I also realize that the people who live in the neighborhood probably would like to walk on the sidewalk.
So with this being a discussion point, I think we've given some good direction, I believe.
We'll move forward.
Okay.
I'd just like to, but get a little more clarification. Is the biggest reason that this is coming up again now because of the change in legislation that's going to make it harder to assess?
It's not changing legislation, it's a court decision.
Interpretation of it.
And it's also because what we're doing with infill is only the newer subdivisions that had those requirements of putting in sidewalks to start with. You can't just go back in a neighborhood that doesn't have any requirement for sidewalks. If you want to put a sidewalk there, you have to put a sidewalk there.
Right.
And I question whether we might get some pushback, because...
Well, we might, but then we hear about it.
Right. Am I reading this correctly?
Yeah.
On the last page of this in our packet where it gives the cost. So it's looking like for an average lot, not the one on Country Meadows Drive that's big and so on, but for an average lot, we're talking about $2,500-ish. Is that correct? That's what it would take to do the sidewalk? And I don't mean to say $2,500 is nothing, but am I reading that correctly?
I think that's what, the 28,000 or close to 30,000?
That's correct. So we've identified the approximate cost for each lot.
Right.
Yeah.
So if I'm a developer and I have, let's say, I have 4 lots in Stonehaven, what we're talking about is the developer might get a waiver at this point, right?
That was my
I guess the point that I'm trying to make is if I have 4 lots and I really want to sell them and I have to spend $10,000 to put sidewalk on them so that I can finish this neighborhood, that doesn't seem unreasonable to me.
Right. So procedurally, we're going to come back to one, we're going to send out notice to the property owners, and we'll try to get an idea of who may be interested in saying, you know what, I got this taken care of. I know it's got to get done, and I'll just take care of it, and I'll hire my own contractor to get it done. Okay. And then we're going to have others that are maybe like, you know what, go ahead, take care of it, assess me, that way the cost gets spread out over a number of years. We hope to identify that pretty quick. And then from there, we're going to begin that process of the resolution necessity, setting the public hearing, holding the public hearing. And so there are going to be procedurally, the council is going to probably have it come before them, I want to say 4, 5, 6 times. And so we just want to make you aware of that. Otherwise, with the normal maintain and repair your sidewalk, you get it once early on to establish what the kind of the fees are going to be, and then we take care of it from there, and then usually the next time you see it is when we're finalizing the assessment schedule. Okay. So that's under the normal maintain and repair program. The infill program here, you're going to see it 4, 5, 6 times throughout the summer. Okay?
I just have one thought I want to put in here. Would it at all make sense to, at first, approach it voluntarily and say from the assessment, just send a letter, to everyone, hey, if you want to put this in, and the city is, we found this contractor, we can get it, down to this per square footage, and do it that way first. And I'm actually, it's against my political nature, but I'm actually not afraid of force here. I think sidewalks and connectivity is important. We just need to do it and assess it, whether it's an empty lot or it just needs to be done outside of the illogical, into the cornfield. And even, there are places where it just may not make sense. So that'd be my thought.
I think that's always
send a letter, but the voluntary part's been going on for 6 to 15 years, and they've not done it. So that's the hard part for us, but we'll send a letter initially, remind them, and then we'll go from there and see what we get.
Okay.
So not to beat this anymore.
Yeah.
We're good.
Yep.
We'll move forward.
Perfect. All right, moving to item number 3, review of council policies and rules of procedure. I know we usually do this the winter, spring, following an election. I know Rod had some items. I didn't get a chance to meet with Brad ahead of time like I wanted to talk about a couple other things. I do know that I think it's Rod's intention as well, like we talked about, for us to get together, but get something in there regarding board and commission appointments and the procedure for establishing a formal procedure that occurs through. Other than that, was there anything from you, Mr. Bronner? Okay. Brad, did you have?
No, I think the last time we updated it, I think we made quite a few good changes to it. My only comment would be, and I mentioned this before, I would like to see some, and this really doesn't probably have to be written down in our procedures, but I would just like when a citizen comes to the public comment section and actually takes the time to come to the meeting and gets the intestinal fortitude to come to the microphone and tell us about an issue that they're having or an idea that they have. And unfortunately, because it's not on the agenda and because of the open meeting laws, we really can't respond or even discuss it. And we kind of sit here like bumps on a log, and they're very disappointing. They turn around and sit down, and, well, they weren't listening. They don't care. They didn't respond. I think it would be a good idea that if the mayor at the beginning of that public comment section could maybe state that, make sure that the people that come up and comment understand that we will not be discussing their ideas tonight, but that it will be referred to the city administrator or someone else, and it may be put on the agenda for a future meeting, so that they don't go back thinking, oh, they didn't listen, they're just sitting there and nodding their heads, and that's it. We had that, probably not the last couple of years, but I know the first year or two that we were on council, that happened quite often, and I felt really bad that these people came up and brought those issues to us, and there was no response whatsoever. That, and then I think all of you know that I'm not a real big fan, and nothing personal, but I'm not a real big fan of the guest counsel program. I think I'm probably in the minority here, so I won't even bring that up. But that, in my opinion, would be something that I think should be taken a look at, maybe have some standards, or at least a stated purpose for why we're doing it.
Yeah, and I've given that some thought too,
Is that in this?
No,
Oh.
I don't
Okay.
believe it is.
Okay.
But as far as having some stipulations of, stipulations of conduct and timeliness of, people being on, as guests, that kind of thing.
What do you mean?
So it doesn't turn into a platform, necessarily. I know that was, brought up, previously, or more recently, so.
Brad, I think what you're looking for actually is in here, 2.16 subsection 2.
As far as public comment?
Citizen may appear at the public forum, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
It does say that you can answer a question briefly.
Yeah, and we added that.
Presentation,
We
council,
actually,
the mayor can direct myself to investigate further, report back to the next meeting. You can do that during public forum.
we added the language there about permit simple responses or answers to the comments. So I think that was probably a good thing to do, but I do think that it would be, and here again, this is just my opinion. I don't think there's anything we have to put in, but I think that it's a good idea for people to understand, because they don't understand, they haven't read these, and frankly, I'm not sure how many of us have read all the way through these, that when they come up here to talk to the council, they expect to get some kind of a response, or maybe even a vote that night on what they're talking about. And they need to understand we can't do that because it has to be on the agenda, and we have to go through all of these rules to have that done. So I want to make sure that the people that take the time to come up here and talk to us understand how the process works. I think we all do, but they need to understand.
But there will be no deliberation.
There will be no deliberation that night because it would have to be on the agenda, and their suggestions or complaints or whatever will be handled by the mayor and the city administrator or whatever.
Would it be something that we get a response that either James or even Bill or the mayor responds to the individual, that would go into the next council session in terms of reports?
From staff?
Yeah, we get reports from staff and boards and commissions that we just have, here's the response, so that it's on the record that we have responded to them, that it is public.
Closes the loop.
It kind of connects that if there is further action that is needed from the council, the whole council knows where we're going with that. Some of the times they bring up something that we really want to jump into, and it does feed into a new resolution or ordinance. Other times it's hey, I've got a question or I've got a concern about something in here. Just close the loop. What was the response? How did the staff look at it? Snowplow keeps coming down and knocking over my garbage can. How do we respond to that? Just a simple, please don't put your garbage can so far out, or we'll keep an eye on where it is. And whatever it happens to be, that there is at least just something to close the loop, to note that we've.
And it states it in here, 2.16 subsection 2. If you would read that, it states right in there clearly, after the oral presentation, the majority of the council or mayor may direct the city administrator to investigate the issue further and report back to the council the next meeting. Everything you're saying is right in this section.
Awesome.
2.16 subsection 2. Read it, know it, love it. It's right there. People come in, have an issue, you want to have it addressed, you merely say address it, we address it. It's right there.
I think that Tim's point was, though, that it's communicated back to the council that it was addressed and this is the resolution.
It says, well, and
It says it right in there.
he says to me, but I don't recall too many times that it's come back to council that it's
I've never been told to do it.
Okay.
I do what I'm told. That's kind of the way it works here, and if you don't tell me to do it, I'm not going to do it.
Well, we could change that.
Well, I do think that also operates on some of the idea that we don't respond at that meeting. So we do need to, at least from the mayor or whoever's presiding officer, to say,
That direction has to be given to him.
Yeah,
That's
the direction has to be given to
But
say.
it's also clear, any one of us can initiate the, that's an issue, can we direct that to the city administrator to take care of that?
Majority decides to do it per 2.16 section 2, then you can do that.
Does that
and that's the
vote that we have
thing.
to take then, or is that a?
When you say majority.
4 of us have to tell you.
Consensus.
Consensus is what we'd be
That's where
looking
it
for.
becomes, because it's not on it gets into that open meeting question again. Now,
Policy
Well, we're in a
procedure.
meeting, so we can just say to him.
And I'll tell you this, I don't think James, if I gave direction to James to follow up on something, or one or two of you, even if it isn't a consensus,
I'll do it.
for the betterment of the public, he's going to do it.
Okay.
So I think we're splitting hairs essentially on this, really, of
You
of
split
what
them
we're
all
trying to
up, which I
accomplish.
had. They're all gone to be split.
So no,
Could I change the topic?
yes, please.
I have read through all of this, and forgive me if I missed it, but I would like to see in writing the exact procedure for both council's expectations and the public's expectations when there are openings on advisory boards and commissions.
That's why I said at the beginning.
But it's not in here yet, right?
Right, that's why I said at the
Yeah.
beginning. That was one of my introductory as far as,
So
you
what's
know,
the deadline to apply? What's the application?
Exactly.
what's the process? And Rod and I, we've had an appointment and issues came up on both sides of our calendars and personal issues. So that's in the works as far as I know. So
So you guys are going to come up with a draft and
we have not
show
yet.
it to us? No,
We
you're
will.
going to? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And
So
I apologize then. When I read this, and I was looking at all the red parts in our packet and thinking that was the new stuff, and I didn't see anything.
I think those were the
They
last
haven't read it
changes.
yet.
Yeah,
Those were the last changes,
okay.
mostly
Not the
Rod's.
current ones.
That's why we're starting with
And there are,
That's right.
there are other policies for commissions, like for term limits, et cetera, because we looked at those for the airport
There's
commission.
ordinances.
That's in a different, that's an ordinance, that's in a
Right.
different section.
Okay.
Because this is really about council.
So that may carry over to ordinance, or
Procedures.
thoughts. So anyway, hearing nothing further. Moving to number 4, continuation of the January 22nd, 2022 fiscal year 22-23 budget discussion, if needed.
Just looking for any additional comments, questions, concerns, anything after we went 9 hours Saturday. Beat it to death. I think we've covered about everything. So to update you on the debt side of things, we will probably look at issuing debt maybe more in the late summer, early fall. We will not start this budget initially, but your payments would come in 24 instead, and that's for the water building itself and how we're looking to renovate it. It's more complicated than I thought, but that's why we have people in the Moines to do this. So we're working through it. They'll be possibly putting it into a separate urban renewal area, because that's what it would become, is redeveloping that. And so there's a lot of different classifications. A lot of them I didn't think really applied, so we're looking at urban renewal. That takes time, and so we'll take our time, do it right, and it'll probably be late summer, early fall. We'll start to actually get funding together once we investigate a little more as to partnerships, grants, et cetera, what it looks like, what it is. And so the only real debt you'll have is the note for the equipment for the golf course, and that's a simple public hearing. It's already funded and in there, the payments for it, so that's not an issue. I don't really have anything else as a follow-up that we had. Everything's pretty much as it was. So
What about?
the seasonal stuff, we're kind of going to go, we've looked at so many scenarios, it's exhausting, but there is no great entry or great entrance to this whole problem. We know there's an issue. We are very well aware that we're having struggles attracting seasonals, and wages, of course, the big issue. So we are looking at just increasing these positions $1 or $2, which is not that substantial. It's actually the least expensive of the options we had, and not doing a huge jump because that may be irresponsible, and so that'd be the smallest thing we would do. Enter that into the budget. It'll still be within what we discussed with you already because we've removed some things. It'll all fill in right behind it. There won't be any increase necessarily, and we'll try and adjust in another year more if needed, but we're going to try and take a kind of a smaller approach into this and not a real substantial jump in some of this because it may not be necessary depending on the position. I know the summer help lifeguards we struggle quite a bit with. That may go a little further, others maybe not as much, so we're going to try and take a more conservative approach and get that addressed, and that way we're just not going to go through 8, 10, 15 scenarios to sit and look at and bore you to death with them. We'll just go in a little bit and a little more reasonable, and hopefully that'll address some of it.
So the other two areas of debt were the part of the all-inclusive playground that you were going to put in with the golf equipment, and then the 7th Avenue.
The engineering.
The flooding, the engineering for that part.
The engineering, we'll take from the CIP. I've got that funded, and then the all-inclusive part, that's a little more of a headache than we anticipated, so we'll have to work through that. There's just a lot of requirements because it's part of an athletic complex. We've already borrowed the limit we can. It makes the funding a little more difficult, and so that one was not as clean this morning and crisp. It's going to take a little more work to figure that out.
Okay.
But I'll work with Garrett, and we'll kind of find if there's a way to half that somehow between fiscal years, or there's a lot of options. None of them are great, but we'll find a way somehow. It's just a matter of digging a little further. So, but otherwise, I think, like I said, we're coming in at the same levy rate as this year, with the lower rollback. That actually benefits homeowners. Most of the times it goes up, it works against us completely. So at the same levy rate is what we'll take and present, and on the 7th we'll set the first hearing, the maximum levy hearing, and then we'll still move towards a budget hearing on March 7th, and then we'll progress through. And again, there shouldn't be any real debt issue to speak of, but if there is, we'll have that coming quickly as well. We have a few more calls to make to confirm all that, but we should be in good shape.
So the fall note-taking was recommendation of Spear?
I've even talked to Spear, went to Ehlers, and just to get the logistics and mechanics of it, and it works on paper, and that was the whole thing, is what do we need to apply and what do we not, and so we won't do a pre-levy hearings. We don't anticipate doing a payment in 23.
Correct.
It would go in 24. We would do, we would capitalize the interest instead, and which is a lot smaller payment, and we'll find a way to work that through.
Will that reset our schedule then? That will be our new takeout time period?
No, I think we'll be okay.
All right.
I think it'll still be fine. We'll have funding as we need it. It'll just make the payment schedules a hair longer than we normally would have.
Okay.
So it should not be an issue. So unless you have questions, concerns, we'll proceed with what we had presented, and minus the couple items we talked about, the reductions, and then we'll have a small addition in the seasonal area, which will almost offset that. We'll still be below, I think, a little bit. And then we'll split the mechanic position, as we talked about, 50-50 with road use tax, and that should do it. I don't see anything else that we found that was out of line, although I got to get the second half of that plan in for these guys. That's the one thing we forgot. I'm glad they're here tonight. When we had budgeted that, we knew we had a split July 1, and so the rest of that from July to November, it's already in. I just got to write it in. It's there.
Okay.
I just had to remind myself of that one, so glad Jim was here tonight. It could have been a tough one.
All right.
It's there. So unless there's questions, concerns, I think we're good.
And of course, James is available to touch on that one-on-one for anybody that needs a little bit more coaching there, or questions answered.
Yep.
So,
If you got a question, ask it.
Yep. We'll move forward with Section H, reports from boards and commissions. I have the Airport Commission minutes of December 9th of 2021 received in record. Move to Section I, staff updates. Mr. Bronner.
I think Garrett has a brief update tonight,
Okay.
sir.
We are set for the Candlelight Ski Saturday, February 12th. It'll be at 5 o'clock. Start at the trailhead and walk, snowshoe, ski, whatever you want to do, fat tire bike, whatever you want to do. Take a mile out. We have a campfire turnaround and come on back. We are looking for volunteers to help with setup and takedown. So if anyone's interested, just get a hold of me in the Leader Services office. Thanks.
Thanks, sir.
We'll have snow this year?
What's that?
Think we'll have snow this year?
I think we'll have snow this year.
Pop-up event, I mean,
That's right.
Wednesday morning.
yeah, see? That's all we have.
All right, thank you. City Council comments, Mr. Birgen.
I would like to invite anyone who would like to discuss city council business to join me for a beer at the Poorhouse after city council.
Thank you. Ms. Beaufore.
No comments, thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Rathe.
We have a new CEO at Waverly Health Center, Matt Johnson. If you haven't met him yet, he has a pretty cute video on the Facebook page for the hospital. His cute, squirmy 2-year-old stole the show, but it's a nice introduction to him and his family. I think it's 4 or 5 minutes long, so check that out.
Okay. Ms. Meyers.
Nothing for me tonight?
Mr. Schneider. Mr. Drenkow.
Nope.
Mr. Kelly.
Just thanks to Tim for inviting me to partake in this, and it's been eye-opening. And
Good deal. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Kangas.
I just, the only thing I wanted to point out was that, I don't know if people saw the news, but the Iowa Girls High School Athletic Union is going to sanction girls wrestling next year. And I like to think that Waverly Shell Rock was definitely at the forefront of supporting that and building that up, particularly hosting the first couple state championships in Waverly, but then expanding. It's obviously expanded and supporting outward.
And they
Yeah.
won.
Yep.
They won the title.
So yeah, that was my only comment, is we've got a 4-peat, and hopefully we can start things off next year sanctioned at number 1 at the top and make it 5 years in a row with the first year sanctioning. We'll see the ladies and coaching staff and support staff or support athletes here soon to recognize them. Other than that, I appreciate Tim stepping in for the last meeting and the budget session in my absence and conducting the meeting. Other than that, I'll seek a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion by Schneider, second by Birgen to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you.